WTS presents
3, 2, 1.
All the Feelings. This episode.
Pride.
Tom.
Peter.
Welcome to All the Feelings, our podcast that we do together.
This is something that we do together, and we make it as a podcast, and that was a decision we made a long time ago.
So long ago. It is a real treat to be here with you. This is something that this show is something that I look forward to, but not only that, when it goes out into the world, I'm really quite proud of it.
Oh, well, maybe that's involves this week's episode.
We should talk about that. This week we're doing Pride.
Pride. Noun. A feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements, the achievements of those with whom one is closely associated, or from qualities or possessions that are widely admired.
Real quick, something I'm not proud of is my voice. Avid listeners will be able to hear that my voice is struggling a little bit. I had a big weekend, but I'm filled with life, and I'm excited to be here, and I apologize ahead of time. It'll be like last week when Dr. Dodge turned into a robot every once in a while.
Robot, right.
I'm just slowly disintegrating.
Yes. This is all an experiment in how long it will take Spotify listeners to complain about audio issues. Boy, of all the platforms, Spotify listeners do like to let me know.
Is that true?
There are audio issues when audio goes funky.
WTS from now on stands for, what's that sound?
We are talking about Pride today. And Pride, when it started, because we were on this regression trip last week, it took me a bit to figure out what is Pride? Is Pride still an emotion? Is it like Pluto? It's not a planet anymore?
Yeah.
And it turns out I'm totally wrong. Pride is it's a feeling, it's an emotion, and I'm just not very good at it.
Okay, so that's what you were coming out the other way. I like to think of everything I feel as one of the deadly sins, and this is like the first one.
Yeah.
So we're coming in hot.
It's funny that pride as an emotion is a sin, isn't it? It seems like that's a rough place to start. And it turns out that there's a reason for that, which I'm sure we're going to get to. But I want to start with some of the words associated with pride and the things, Tom, that you are proud of.
Oh, okay. What am I proud of?
What are you proud of? I don't know.
Well, the thing about me that I'm trying to get better at here, I'll just dive into my very, very, very short personal segment about how I relate to it, which is very short. It's something that we talked about this a little bit on the other podcast with Nikki, but it applies here very much, the ADHD podcast.
Yeah, we should do a plug because that's coming out, I think, concurrent with this. Like, it's coming out. And so if you want to hear Tom talk to Nikki Kinzer, ADHD coach, and me, also me, on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast, you should do that because it was a really fun episode. It was a nice to get you back over there.
It was fun.
Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.
Full disclosure, I do not myself have ADHD, but there's a lot of intersecting emotions, and I have enough mental things going on that I'm allowed to slide in through the back door.
Well, and that's what we've always done. Whenever you come on, it's been because all three of us, you, me, and Nikki, live with a fair degree of anxiety. And that's always been sort of a comorbid ADHD thing. So anyhow.
And when all three of us get together, it's like crossing the streams. We become very, very powerful. The thing about pride that I have been actively trying to get a lot better at is feeling it correctly, feeling authentic pride after doing something that I'm proud of. Let me explain. One of the ways, because you mentioned anxiety, if I'm nervous about something new that's coming up or some big performance or something, I'm really suffering from anticipatory anxiety. I do it. I'm lucky enough. It goes very, very well. I shouldn't say unlucky enough. I'm taking pride out of it. I achieve it. It goes well. And I come out the other end. And largely I've learned that my pattern is not to feel pride, but instead to go, whew, I got away with that one. Good work, Charlie Brown. Let's see how it goes next time. Instead of using that as like, hey, I was really worried about that. I did well. I should use that as confidence for the future. Use that pride as armor. And instead, it's always just like skin of the teeth. That one I fooled everybody. We'll see how it goes next time. We're going to be talking about how pride has both positive and negative connotations. I'm actually trying to inject a little bit more pride in myself in order to make myself feel better for the future.
This gets to exactly the thing that I want to ask you about.
Oh,
yeah. Can I
absolutely.
interject in the middle of your very short thing? I want to interject what possibly is a bigger question.
Oh, no.
Okay. How do you learn, or I should say, how did you learn pride?
How did I learn pride? Maybe I've learned that sometimes the best answer is the very first one that flashes into your head.
Okay.
I think it must have been one of the first times that my parents, namely more my father, told me that he was proud of me.
Okay.
Because that was something, I don't mean to make it sound like he was always withholding pride and be like, now I'm proud. I just mean like hearing that and not being ready for the immense amount of feeling that came along with that. That pride, saying you're proud of someone, has so much strength that I think that's maybe where I learned it. Does that make sense?
I think it is interesting. I've been thinking about it as we've been going into this, as I've been prepping for this show. And it fascinates me, the nature of learning pride, particularly because there are associated words with, pride, like, and there's this, it started because there's this researcher who put this table together, and these words for both authentic and hubristic pride. Those are sort of the two flavors. And the words I find interesting because I wonder how I learned to internalize a subset of these words when I was a kid, because it feels like when you learn to be proud of what you do, right? As you said, when your dad said, "I'm proud of you, son." And, what are the kinds of activities that you did that led to something happened that you could be proud of?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really play sports. I was not a sportsman in my youth. I did play soccer I think I talked about this. I played youth soccer and on a very winning team, but played a goalie on a very winning team and never really played. I just stood there and so like I had nothing to be proud. I didn't feel like I ever earned a win as a part of that team, and didn't play long enough to really get good at it to feel like I was accomplished. By the time I was in high school and started performing more regularly, I think I started getting the hang of it, but didn't quite understand why. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have a whole lot of those very early days of doing something that both I felt good about having done and other people told me I should be proud of what I just accomplished. And so I would be on stage and I would perform, but I had no idea like why. If I did well, I didn't know how to rationalize that in my life. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, because and I'll be getting into that a little bit more in my is that pride is an internal feeling, but that usually also comes from an external additional feeling that you said that I feel that I did good, but it also needs other people saying you did good. It's a car crash of those two things that can be sometimes really easy, sometimes really hard, especially in a non-performing situation, for both of those to feel, because I think you really do need both of those. That's what makes it partly authentic pride versus hubristic.
Yes. Okay. That's a really interesting thing. And I, as you know, I'm a brand new fan of Formula One racing.
Yep.
And I'm loving it. And the guy, there are people, there are athletes in the cars that exemplify this. And it is fascinating to me to see how these guys have grown up and become people that I like to watch win versus people that win and I hate to watch.
Right. Well, because the difference between authentic pride and hubristic pride, it's easier to define one by defining the other. Authentic pride is, I did this thing and I did well in it and I should feel good about that. Hubristic pride can very basically be summed up as, I did good at that, I must be good at everything.
Right.
Like you take that one little thing and say, I must be amazing at all things and people should listen to me as such. Versus authentic pride, which is, I really had that one moment, which was great. And I can remember that and use that to help others.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and in a sports context, like when I watch Lewis Hamilton win in Mercedes, it is, he always comes back around and says, yeah, I know. I'm a real fan. I know names.
I love it. No, I'm so excited.
And I watch him against, I got really excited and I went back and watched an old race. yesterday, and to watch him win and hear him say, I am just like honored by the other people in the field, and I'm honored to be here, and the team is amazing, and I feel like as such an honored representative of this team and this car and all the people that put this together versus, he wins against somebody who says, like, I only came in second because of something somebody else did to me.
Right.
I would have won if only they hadn't turned into me and not taken responsibility for it. Like, a mistake is a mistake. And to carry pride over as an excuse becomes arrogance, right?
Yeah.
And narcissism. Like, that gap is defined to me as narcissism. And I think that is a really... that has been a really interesting thing. And I've never had that as a kid. Like, I never grew up with that kind of experience as a role model. It took me, I feel like, a lot of time to figure out that those words exist and define a feeling that I would experience at some point.
I believe I had, and friends of the show could probably fill in, people that I grew up with could fill in better for me. Please do not take a note. Please do not write in. But I think that because I was so filled with anxiety, but was also a big performer, I think at times I probably became over cocky because I was so insecure. And then I felt such highs and such lows that I took a long time about pride. I think it took a long time to find myself, and probably erred on the side of grossness just because I was screaming inside. And so I needed to project. And probably that started as pride, and I'm sure as it would for any kid at some point or teenager, I'm sure it spilled over into arrogance at some point. I'm sure.
So Dr. Tracy in 2007 presented this list of sort of words.
Wait, who is Dr. Tracy? Did you already bring
Dr. Tracy
up? It's like a friend of the show. It's how you made it sound like. Dr. Tracy, who's in the other room.
Dr. Tracy is the author of the article, the journal article, The Psychological Structure of Pride, A Tale of Two Facets, in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and presents this table of words. And I really like the sort of antithesis buried in this table. Under authentic pride, it comes from somebody who feels accomplished or confident or triumphant, somebody who is a, quote, winner, victorious, achieving, honor, right? These are all words of like internal strength that comes with authentic pride. And hubristic pride, arrogant, conceited, cocky, stuck up, boastful, haughty, egotistic, self-righteous, pompous, pretentious, like all of those words that indicate a sort of a pretender. And what the research came out, Dr. Tracy's report says these findings show that authentic pride is associated with high self-esteem, whereas hubristic pride is associated with low self-esteem, high narcissism, and a tendency to experience shame. And I think that is fascinating.
Right. Because one comes from inner strength. The other one is trying to pretend, look how much inner strength I have. So one is radiating, authentic pride is radiating into yourself. Hubristic pride exists only to radiate out to others.
Well, and here's another piece. That
I love pieces.
That I feel like my sense of reading this is when I see somebody who, like Lewis Hamilton, who is incredibly well accomplished, well spoken, has a fantastic family life, all this stuff, that when Lewis wins a race, the pride is the pride about the accomplishment, and that's it, right? Like that's the end. That experience doesn't have to do the heavy lifting of low self-esteem, right? Yeah. And so somebody who has low self-esteem comes off as arrogant and cocky because they need that win, the thing that they just accomplished, to buoy so many more aspects of their personality.
Because they're just they're bailing emotional water all the time.
Yes, that is my new kind of awakening to what this looks like. Is that it just has cockiness and conceitedness is doing more sort of psychological work.
Right. It's a band-aid.
Social behavioral work.
You're just trying to fill in all the holes. God, if there was ever anyone in the news that represented that kind of hubristic. I just can't, nothing comes to mind. That's so interesting.
I can't believe this was written in 2007. Frankly. Yeah. And the final quote, like, in fact, narcissism is associated with a discrepancy between low implicit self-esteem and high explicit self-esteem. In other words, a trademark of narcissism is that deep down, on a non-conscious level, narcissists experience high levels of shame and low self-esteem. To compensate for these negative evaluations of self, they express an inflated conscious self-esteem.
Right.
That's crazy.
The most you're screaming about how great you are. Yeah, it's got to be you're filling in for something else, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't think I learned that until really learned that as like, oh, I get it. Like it's the, but we know that kind of thing, like even growing up, the joke about growing up, like when I first moved here, like the louder and flashier your car is, what's the joke you make? You're compensating for something.
Compensating.
Right. And that's that exact same thing, but you don't think about it that much as that's compensating for something physical. Compensating for something emotional is something that I didn't learn until later of like, well, why is I get it. Because it's a shell. Because there's so much turmoil inside and it's such a sinking boat that, you will do whatever you need to do to stay afloat emotionally. Yeah. Which sucks. That's sad to see someone like that. But if they're being really, really gross, I got to be honest, there's a little bit of Schadenfreude in that of like, that is sad.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not talking
sad.
about I'm not saying who I'm talking to, but it's like I see what's really going on, and I'm sure you're getting a great night of sleep.
Yeah.
A Toad Can Die of Light by Emily Dickinson. A toad can die of light. Death is the common right of toads and men, of Earl and Midge, the privilege. Why swagger then? The gnat's supremacy is large as thine.
Every now and again, the internet gives the perfect response to a thing you didn't know needed one. Once you learn it, you want to say it all the time. Sure, because you think you're funny doing it, but also because it's the perfect way to punchline a braggadocious setup that doesn't see it coming. But what is it? What is that sweet package of perfect language, the Swiss Army knife of internet wit, to put strange pride in its place? For example, when user DsNuts2050 posted on Twitter, "What I spend on gummies, you'll probably spend on gas, LOL." You want to say something, right? Or when now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh said during his confirmation hearings that he was a virgin in high school and, quote, many years after. There's a response somewhere that really puts that statement in its place. Or when user Which wrote in their Twitter bio that, "I sell soap and I like stale Cheetos. I also collect teeth." So help me, there are words to use here, but I do not know what they are. Internet, help me. These are ridiculous things. In the before times, you might have laughed to yourself and moved on about your day, but those times didn't make it. They died with the pencil sharpener and the monocle. Today, we have a solution to this linguistic conundrum, and it comes thanks to Malala. Sort of. In 2017, Malala's Twitter bio reported that she loved 2017, was a UN Messenger of Peace, an honorary citizen of Canada, and was studying for her A-levels and was really anguish emojiing her way through them. Seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to report, but not to fellow Twittisan Finn Fiery, who responded on December 31st, 2017, with words that would change the internet forever until we inevitably get sick of them because they've been taken over by our parents on Facebook. Weird flex, but okay. Now, Malala didn't deserve such snark, but that didn't matter. The snark was what lived. The snark became a setup shark, hunting for weird things on the internet to respond to. Go ahead. All those examples above, try them now. What I spend on gummies, you'll spend on gas, LOL. Weird flex, but okay. Brett Kavanaugh was a virgin for so many years after high school. Weird flex, but okay. I also collect teeth. Weird flex, but okay. Of course, I'm monologuing on this far too late. I'm pretty sure the internet moved on, and I'm now the parent I just joked about a second ago. That's okay. For me, the snark shark still hunts. And now that I'm properly armed, that weird brag will finally be put in its place. Or, as you might be inclined to say to me, right now, sir, this isn't Arby's. Now that you know how not to flex that you listen to this dumb podcast, pay it forward and become a feeling friend today. For just $35, you'll get access to the member live stream when we record, early access to the shows in your very own member podcast feed, our latest batch of stickers, and a present from Tom, the classic ATF bingo card. Visit our fancy new URL for the show, allthefeelings.fun today.
Pete, as we said maybe earlier, you, and as you just demonstrated, you're more of like the science guy sometimes than me. I'm not saying you're only science. You're so much more than science. Look at that.
You just put me in a box.
I would never
That's
put
fine.
you in a box, and I would never put you in a corner. You colored a watermelon. What I'm saying is that a lot of the times I just tell horrible stories about myself. But this time I found this one experiment. But you know, I do love experiments. And I found one that involved pride. Now, as we've already talked about a lot, pride is often thought about as a negative emotion. But I like that we are coming at it as we want to talk about authentic pride versus hubristic pride. Two psychology professors, the idea of pride comes before the fall. Two psychology professors at the University of New South Wales, named David DeSteno and Lisa Williams, thought that pride could actually, if used correctly, could be a real virtue instead of just sort of being a negative emotion. That it could be a great motivator, making one more patient, willing to carry on past challenges, and help yourself resist distractions from achieving a goal. And so they wanted to use an experiment to see if this was true. And to test this idea, they created what would be called the, quote, visuospatial experiment. Do you have any idea what visuospatial means?
Yes. So I think what happened was they put them on a standing in a room, and then they said, "You're so smart, you're so funny, are you proud?" And then they'd say, "Yes, I'm so proud." And then the researchers dropped the floor in front of them out and said, "You're about to fall, are you proud now?" And that was the whole thing.
Literally doing the pride.
And that's yeah, they just wanted to see if pride carried immediately before the fall.
Yeah, neither of them are professors any longer. It was incredibly dangerous and incredibly non-scientific. Visuospatial, I think what you meant to say was it means just relating to visual perceptions of objects and how they relate to each other. It is a largely nonsensical thing. Like
I think our listeners got that from my example, but whatever. It's
okay,
fine.
got it. So here's the basic idea of the experiment, and I'm going to try to sum it up as quickly as possible. Here's what they wanted to do. They wanted to show that pride could make people persevere, keep going at something, whether they liked doing it or not. So if there was an activity that they had a goal for, they didn't like doing it, they were told you don't have to do it anymore. But if they had pride, they would keep at it. And so DeSteno explained that they realized they'd have to make people take pride in an ability that they didn't know they had and couldn't have any interest in pursuing. So they had to convince people that they were good at something that others valued. That's the big part. And that they could take pride in. Only then could they determine if pride would translate into greater diligence in honing that ability. And because they also needed to make sure people didn't enjoy the work, they had to make the work annoying. End quote. That wasn't really a quote, but I used almost all of their language. Okay, anyways. So this is where visuospatial ability came in. They invited a whole bunch of participants to test what they said was their visuospatial ability. No one involved knew what that meant going in, and no one still knows. I've explained it 3 times. Still no one knows what it means. Each participant was seated in front of a computer and asked to complete 2 relatively meaningless tasks involving color and shapes. They were told that the first task involved looking briefly at an image of dots of different colors and then recalling how many of the dots were a certain color. not helpful.
I have to tell you, yeah. So far I struggle to find a skill that others find value in.
Wait for it, baby. Wait for it. Note that it would be hard for the participant to know how well they did after completing the first task. You just have a couple seconds of a whole bunch of dots, and then they say how many were red. And you say it, and maybe you got it right, maybe you got it wrong, you're not sure. They were told that the second task would be harder and would test their abilities, their visuospatial abilities that they used in the first task even more. And they only had to work on it as long as they wanted. Okay, Pete, I appreciate your question. Here's where it gets interesting. It's actually not the two tasks, which, as I said before, are meaningless. It's what comes in between the two tasks.
They invented cold fusion.
No.
Nailed it.
After completing the first task, which was how many of the colored dots were red, we broke it into three. There's this huge amount of people, and there's three different groups. 1/3 of the participants were just asked to simply sign a form and then proceed on to that next task, which again involved more shapes and nonsense and was a lot harder and less interesting. This was the neutral or control group. This is just the people that, we need to show the difference of the other three against them. Okay, so that's 1/3 of the group, the control or neutral group. They're just sailing through. The second third of the group, or what the professors called the pride group, after completing the first task, were introduced to an experimenter who acted very impressed.
Okay.
After what they did on the first task. They told them that their visual spatial ability was in the 94th percentile, very, very high, and they were strongly complimented on their high score. And then they were sent in to complete the second task. The third group...
So far, this just feels really mean. So far, it's mean.
All social experiments are mean. That's the whole thing.
Right.
And then at the very end, every social experiment ends with, you thought you were doing what? Okay. And then the final third, so this is interesting. We're not met with a very excited or proud experimenter. Instead, they were just giving a printout of their high score. So they had a printout saying that they were in the 94th percentile, but with no added praise or compliments. That means the difference is they had a result of their success, but they were taking social acclaim out of the equation. So you sail through and do nothing 1 to 2. You do 1, you get tons of compliments, and you go on to number 2. Number 3, you get a piece of paper saying, yeah, you're pretty good, and then you go on.
You were present.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then in the other room, they give one group the prisoner's clothes and one group the prison guard's clothes. Is that when does that happen?
They're each given a button and it shocks themselves over and over again, and they have to just keep pressing the button. This is a terrible social experiment.
Social experiments are fun.
Yeah. So we have,
okay, what happened next?
Have those three groups. Go ahead and predict. What do you think happened to all three of those groups? Now, what they were trying to see is how long will they stay at the second task? The second task, again, is equally meaningless, harder, and they are told you just have to do it as long as you want. You can leave anytime you want. So how long will they stay at this task?
I think the group that got the social pride, they really malalaed it, and they went all the way.
Exactly right. The pride group stayed working on the second task way longer than the other two groups by over 40%. And the third group, interestingly, those who received the positive score feedback but didn't have any social acclaim, they bounced as fast as the first group. So just having a printout without someone telling you how impressive it is, just having a printout of your success didn't matter. So self-efficacy was also not a factor. It was pride. Pride was the great motivator. So, and in this way, the experimenters, to use their quote, they described that pride doesn't always precede a fall. Pride nudges the mind to value the future. It fosters diligence and dedication. This person was impressed by me, and so I want to keep doing this thing that I've just learned I'm supposedly amazing at. Looking at dots with colors. That makes a ton of sense to me. I just hadn't thought of it in that way before. Pride as a motivator. I want to do this thing that isn't fun because I'm looking forward to how proud I will be in the future looking back. That's what it means of valuing the future. I'd never thought about those words before.
Never. In a million years, I never would have made that connection. And they also wrote the premise of Severance, right? Like that's the whole social experiment is finding the scary numbers and giving them a tea party.
Because we still don't know what they're doing in Severance.
Nope.
It's a bunch of numbers and taking things out, which probably leads to something incredibly nefarious. Everything goes back to the DOD all the time.
Everything's bad.
Department of Defense.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And just like I love the specificity of this gobbledygookish idea of visual spatial ability, because they were proud. It left them being proud of one very specific ability, and that helped them prevent them falling into hubristic pride, which we talked about before.
Yes.
You can't say, I'm so good at looking at dots that I must be great at driving a tractor trailer. Instead, it keeps you motivated in that one specific field to have pride in.
But did they didn't make any connection between like not giving enough, like when you give somebody the piece of paper that says, hey, you have a score, you were present, those people didn't get followed to find out if they ended up being arrogant or conceited or stuck up or any of those things. Like they didn't become hubristically prideful.
It doesn't seem to be, because
they literally didn't care.
They didn't care. And also, what are you going to say? Hey, check out me, Mr. Dot Spotter. That's the cool thing about the experiment, is you can't be hubristically proud of, you know what I mean? It's not even a good story to tell. That's why our watchers, feeling friends that are watching, I was waving my hands the entire time during telling this, because it is designed to be boring on purpose and non-relatable and not leading towards a goal. It's just, I see shapes and how they relate to each other. That sucks. But being told that you're really good and it's valued. That wasn't just, hey, they were like, wow, you are really impressive. This can really help. It made that almost an altruistic kind of a thing. Desteno says one cool more thing about pride, but I wanted to, before did this bring up any other feelings for you? Because I think it's really fascinating. It just puts words together in a way that I never would have thought about pride.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish it makes me rethink so many parenting decisions that I've made. Right?
About how to motivate your kids?
About how to motivate my kids. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, like, parents will know. It's hard in the moment to think about those things, because you're not naturally attuned to celebrating. It can feel like celebrating with faint praise.
Right.
A kid, because what you want is to aspire them to be really great and have great taste, and that it's sometimes you just have to say, you did a good thing. You're good at that. What you did. Right. And in your head, you're saying you're great at that as a 6-year-old. Right? Like, it's okay. I had this conversation with my son, because we still have in our bedroom an actual work of art, a square canvas that is 10 inches square of something that he had painted and when he was very young. And he said, he's standing in my room the other day, and now he's like going on 18. And he said, that is an objectively bad painting.
Objectively.
He said, why? He said, why is that still hanging in your bedroom?
Yeah.
He said, because it reminds us that the 6-year-old who painted that did a good thing. The 6-year-old who painted that loved it. And that was the level of the 6-year-old's taste and aspiration. And then it was great. And today, when we look at it, it reminds us of that feeling.
Right.
Not of what you could paint today. Right. And he said, I probably couldn't paint that today. Let's just say in the intervening years, he hasn't spent a lot of time painting. Sure. But that's the idea. And when he was 6, I wonder if I would he have painted more in the intervening years if I had told him more assertively, language. That's good. You're good. You have something to be proud of. And see what happened. Yeah. Right?
That always seems like that is exactly right. And I mean, would be one of my biggest anxieties as a parent I don't realize that I'm talking in commandments, meaning you just sort of toss things off. And depending on how fraught the situation is for the kid, you are writing things in stone. And then you're just giving fodder for the Bonnies, fodder for the therapist. That always reminds me of American Beauty, a movie that kind of holds up. But when they do the big cheerleading routine, and Annette Bening talks to her daughter afterwards, goes, I was watching you the whole time. You didn't mess up once. That's her way of complimenting. Yeah. And it flashes to the daughter, and she's like, okay, this isn't going to be what I wanted at all. But that makes sense. For motivation, we usually think of like motivational posters or bosses saying, we can do this if we work together and stuff, instead of being like, think about how you'll feel looking back. Like it's an interesting way to use that as a motivation, especially because pride is usually thought of as a negative thing. Destano has a TED Talk where he didn't really talk about his experiment. I found that in a separate place, but he does talk about pride in his TED Talk. And one of the coolest things that he ended with is he had a suggestion on how to use pride for others. I'm paraphrasing using all of my own words here, but the ideas, of course, is here. He's pretty much saying, don't hoard your pride. That we are talking about it being a very fulfilling internal feeling, but then what you're proud of means that you have achieved something or achieved a certain amount of excellence. Use that to help others learn what you're proud of, how to learn to do what you did so they can then learn it and be proud of it too.
Okay, so give me do a little role play. Demonstrate that for me. Something you're proud of. How would you use your pride?
I would use my pride in saying I'm very proud of being a wedding officiant for a lot of my friends' weddings. I've done 5 of them.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud, and I've learned as I've gone along. And then I've had other people come up to me being like, hey, I've been asked to officiate something in like a year, and I'm really nervous, and I've never done it before. And then I can give them some tips. Not like really smart. The biggest tip I give is 2 things. I say, speak from the heart. And it's 3 words that you have to write down that you will forget. I forgot it the first time I did. It's 3 words that you will forget. But if you get those 3, everything else will go smoothly.
What are the 3 words?
Please be seated. Everyone forgets their first time.
I was sitting here like, you may now kiss the... That's more than 3.
Yeah, exactly.
What could it be?
Yeah, the 3 words are, this won't work. No, it's please be seated. You're so nervous and excited about being the officiant that they come down, he comes down, she comes down. They're looking at each other. Ring bearers are excited. And you forget to have the 200 people in front of you take a seat. And so it gets really weird and people are shifting and trying to like signal you. If you can remember, please be seated, everyone knows they're in good hands. And then you can continue. That's the kind of thing. That's me doing a very lame job of it, but that's me using pride to mentor other people. And I've given that advice to other people. And I'm so lucky people have come back to me at other like friends of friends' weddings and been like, thank you so much. Or I went to a wedding, it was the first time officiant, and I told him the same thing because he was about to not to have them sit down. So very long example. You asked for something pithy probably, but I gave you something real.
I expected a joke.
Yep.
I expected the snark, and I didn't get it. And that is such a great example. That is a objectively great example.
Yeah. But then we watch video now, like later, and I'm like, kiss each other, kissy bride. And I'm like, that is an objectively terrible wedding. Yes, but that's where you were at the time, Tom.
Yes, that was where you were at the time. Ozymandias of Egypt by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away.
I'm putting away my pride. I don't care who's wrong or right. Oh, somehow you got me so magnetized, and I love it. You bring all my dark to light. I used to be.
Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. It has been a fine exploration of our pride. Tom, this week's tune was No Ego, featuring Superman's Fiend by Third Dimension.
Get it, everybody? I really want to keep pointing out all these poems are about the things we're talking about. We're picking songs about things. I don't think we're getting any credit. They're just
I
like,
don't think we are either.
yeah, I think they just
But
think we
we
picked
know.
the first song and the first poem we
Yeah.
find. Ugh.
Yeah.
Why am I so angry
What
at
are
nothing?
what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do next week?
Well, I think that we should do a boomerang episode. This week was all
Okay.
about pride. Instead, now next week, how about we take on pride's gross stepson? I don't know. Let's not make it about stepson. How about doubt?
Oh my goodness.
Doubt and the fear involved with doubt, or
Oh my
the good
goodness.
parts of doubt. We'll see. We haven't written a word yet, but I think doubt would be interesting. And I think that's with pride should also come doubt. And
Bookends.
so let's see how it goes.
We'll see how those dice roll next week. Until then, I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Tommy Metz III. I promise I will have a lot of lozenges in between. Thank you so much for downloading. We will be back next week with all the feelings.
No, we go